She was told to sit down. She scored 45 instead. There is a version of this story where Caitlin Clark plays it safe, where she takes the minutes restriction, trusts the plan, and walks off the floor when she's told to. That version does not end with her name in the record books. That version never happened. What actually happened on that Friday night in Indianapolis was something the entire league is still talking about, and it started with a coach trying to protect her, and a rookie who point-blank refused to be protected. Here's the setup. Caitlin Clark had missed time with a back injury. When she came back, it wasn't on her terms, it was on a minutes restriction, dictated by her coaching staff, built entirely around caution. Before the Seattle Storm game, head coach Stephanie White made it clear there would be a cap on Clark's playing time. That was the plan walking in. Clark had other ideas. And by the time the final buzzer sounded, she had rewritten what a WNBA guard is even capable of doing in under 30 minutes of basketball. Let's get into exactly what happened, because the box score alone should stop you in your tracks. Clark finished with 45 points and 10 assists. 45, 10. In the same game. No player in WNBA history had ever done that before. Not one. She shot 11 for 18 from the field, drained 6 threes, and went a nearly perfect 17 for 19 from the free throw line. She added 4 steals and 2 blocks on top of it. And she did every bit of that in just 29 minutes on the floor, the fewest minutes any player has ever needed to score 45 points in this league's history. That's not a hot shooting night. That's a player operating on a completely different level than everyone else on the floor, in less time than anybody else was given. But here's where it actually gets interesting, because the story isn't just what she did. It's how it almost didn't happen at all. The Fever led by as many as 12 points in the third quarter. Then, with Clark on the bench managing her restricted minutes, Indiana blew the lead. Seattle clawed all the way back, and by the fourth quarter, this game was a dogfight. The Fever were down by as much as 8 points in the final period. And that's exactly the moment when the minutes restriction and the scoreboard collided head-on. Because Caitlin Clark was not coming out of that game. Not with the lead gone. Not with a franchise record on the line. Not with anybody in a headset telling her otherwise. In the post-game press conference, she didn't dance around it. She said it flat out. Steph knows better than that. Trainers know better than that. If they tried to pull her in that moment, she said, they'd have gotten an earful. She told reporters she'd spoken to White at halftime directly. She felt good. She didn't want to lose the game, and she was going to manage her own body from there. That's not a leaked scandal. That's a 23-year-old telling her coaching staff, to their face, that she was staying in. And she backed it up. With under a minute left and the game tied, Clark drove left, shook free with a sidestep, and rose up from 26 feet with the shot clock bleeding out. Nothing but net. She flexed. She let out a scream the entire arena felt. The Fever never trailed again. Final score, 110-107, Indiana. Now here's a detail that makes the whole restriction storyline even more layered. This wasn't a case of a coach being paranoid for no reason. Clark had been dealing with a genuine back issue that had already limited her to an average of 25 minutes over her previous 2 games. White's caution wasn't invented. It was a real medical management decision for a franchise cornerstone coming back from injury. The tension here isn't good versus evil. It's a superstar's competitive fire running straight into a coaching staff's legitimate duty to protect her long-term health. That's a much more human story than any villain narrative. And it's exactly why it's been impossible to look away from. Because this wasn't an isolated moment either. Go back just a few days earlier, and Clark had a different kind of statement game, 14 points, 13 assists, and a career-tying 5 steals in a win over Paige Buchers and the Dallas Wings, in the first head-to-head meeting of the past 2 number 1 overall picks. She was still on a minutes restriction in that one too. Still finding ways to dominate without dominating the clock. And go back further, to her actual return from injury against the Golden State Valkyries, and the story wasn't nearly as clean. Clark went just 4 for 12, scored only 10 points, and the Fever were blown out 80-61. She played 25 minutes in that game, well below the 33-plus minutes she'd been averaging before the injury. That's the piece people forget when they only remember the highlight reel. The restriction wasn't some conspiracy. It was real, it was necessary, and there were nights it clearly cost the team offense. Which makes what happened against Seattle even harder to explain, and even more electric to watch. So by the time Clark dropped 45 and 10 in 29 minutes, this wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was the payoff of weeks of a superstar and her coaching staff negotiating, in real time, how much control a generational talent gets over her own body versus her own game. Let's talk about what this performance actually rewrote in the history books, because there's more than one record here. She became the first player in WNBA history to record 45 points in fewer than 30 minutes. She became the fastest player ever to reach 200 career three-pointers, doing it in just 74 games. She set the Indiana Fever's all-time single-game scoring record, and this marked her fourth career game with at least 30 points and 10 assists. A combination that's only happened 4 other times in the entire history of the league total, across every other player who has ever played. Her backcourt partner Kelsey Mitchell added 30 points of her own that night. Together, Clark and Mitchell combined for 75 points, the most by any duo in a single game in Fever franchise history. And in that post-game interview, Clark wasn't interested in the history lesson. Asked about the milestone, she said she didn't really care about the records. What mattered to her was that the Fever's defense had been embarrassing, and that it was on her to help fix it. That's the detail worth sitting with. A player who just became the first person in league history to hit 40 and 10 in the same game, and her first instinct afterward was to talk about what her team did wrong. That competitive standard is exactly why this minutes restriction storyline keeps resurfacing. Every single time Clark has been capped, she's found a way to make the cap look almost irrelevant, and every single time the cap has been lifted even slightly, there's real tension about how her coaching staff balances her health against her hunger to just play. So here's where this leaves things. Clark has now shown, night after night, that a shortened leash does not mean a shortened performance. But the tension between protect the franchise's future and get out of my way, I'm taking over this game, isn't going anywhere. It's going to resurface the next time she's dealing with any kind of injury. It's going to resurface any time the Fever are down late with her sitting on a restriction. And the next time it does, based on everything we've just seen, there is exactly one way to bet on how Clark responds. If you want to see exactly how this plays out the next time White has to make that call, and whether Clark's minutes restriction gets lifted for good, that's a story still being written in real time, and it's one worth being here for when the next chapter drops. Subscribe if you want to be here when it happens.